All right, let's talk the differences between a 5.9 and a 6.7, both common rail. I've had people ask why I like the 6.7 better than a 5.9. Now, it's not that the 5.9 is bad, it has its good points. I just like the 6.7 for some inherent strengths. They do have their weaknesses, but they're inherent strengths in a few different areas. So let's get into talking about 6.7 versus a 5.9. So I have a couple blocks here, 5.9 block, 6.7 block, and I have a head, 5.9 head, 6.7 head, and a couple injectors. There's not a lot of, there's differences, but not a lot of differences. So some of the parts I don't have out here because they're the same. Like connecting rods, 6.7, 5.9, the same. Crankshafts, basically the same. The 5.9 crankshaft has less stroke than the 6.7. But inherently they don't have problems versus the two of them. So that's why I don't have one out here. Well, I guess the very first thing, let's start on the cylinder heads and injectors. So on one of my other videos, I was talking about putting a 5.9 or putting a 6.7 into a 5.9, okay? And I said you can put a 5.9 injector in a you can put a 5.9 injector into a 6.7, but you can't go the other way. So this is a 6.7 injector that just has a collar on it. You can't go that way. The reason for that is the 5.9 injector is actually longer than the 6.7 injector. That is the reason for it. So I actually measured it, wrote it down. And from this edge to the end here, the distance between here and here on a 6.7 injector is shorter than a 5.9. So this isn't an exact measurement because I did it on an angle, but this gives you an idea, okay? And then that's what the 5.9 injector is. So it's like, let's say for argument's sake, it's like 80 thou difference. And that's the reason you can't put a 6.7 into a 5.9. Like, could you? Yeah, I suppose you could. You could cut this collar down. You know, you could make it work. But why would you want to put a 5.9 in a 6.7? That doesn't make sense. To me, anyway. I wouldn't do it. You could, but why? Why go backwards? Though, I guess I say that and I put a P-pump on a 6.7, so what do I know? Anyways, that is the reason for the injector side of things. As far as the outside of the heads, they're basically like if you're looking at the two of them, unless you know what you're looking at, very, very hard to tell the difference from just looking at them like this. There is a couple different ways. I'm not going to get into that. But when we flip them over, all right, so when you get them flipped over, you're going to see the difference. So this is a 5.9 head, and if they're very similar, but if you see here, there's no holes here, and then on a 6.7 head, now this is a later pickup truck style, so it has the swirl reliefs in it, but don't mind that. That doesn't really make any difference other than that they like to crack there. You get into a 6.7, it's going to have steam ports. So if you're ever looking at a cylinder head, one, if it has these pockets and steam ports. If it has steam ports, unless somebody's been in there monkeying around like me and has used a different head, very good chance it's a 6.7 head. Now, that is one of the flaws to a 6.7 versus a 5.9. The 5.9s inherently did not have near as many head gasket problems, and I contribute that to, myself personally, is these steam holes. Now, the reason they put the steam holes is for coolant flow, and I'll explain more in a minute on the blocks why that is. But that's the reason for those. So that's the reason, like that's a flaw on a 6.7 versus on a 5.9, is that the 5.9 doesn't have those. Everything else is the same. Your bolt holes, spacing are the same, all of that. One thing on the 6.7 is some of the materials they used in valves and some of that stuff was garbage, but they did do some of that on these too. So can't even say it's just a 6.7 or a 5.9 problem. So now some of the cylinder heads, the 6.7s do flow better than the 5.9s, but then there is some of the 6.7s that don't flow as good as the 5.9s. So we won't even get into that. That is something that I am going to get into, but I need to buy a flow bench first. And being that I'm planning on moving, I don't want to buy more equipment right at the moment. So yeah, anyways. So as far as cylinder heads, that's the, you know, the rundown on it. They run the same valve, they run the same guide, they run the same seal, they run the same spring. Now, there is a couple differences in springs, basically the same spring. Like, not splitting hairs, basically the same spring. But that is the rundown on the cylinder head side of things. So let's talk about blocks. Now, this is probably the biggest difference, is the block side of things. Now, obviously, okay, so this one is your 6/7 block. Your bore is bigger. So your your 4 200 thou in change and basically 4-inch. You do have the bore size difference between the two. Now, on the 6/7, you have more holes for coolant flow. Now, that is good and bad at the same time. Now, you can see these two holes here, and the reason that those holes are there is because on these blocks are Siamese bores. So the bores are actually touch in the middle of them. And on a 5/9, they're not like that. So what I'll do is I'll show you. If you look in between, so this is one cylinder, this is another cylinder. And if you look between, you can see that it's a solid chunk, right? Now, if you take the 5/9 and you look in the same spot, the coolant can flow through there. That is the reason for the steam holes. So basically the coolant is, the reason for it, the coolant is supposed to come up the block and then it comes out the two holes, goes into the cylinder head, but it keeps in between the two cylinders cooled off. That's the theory behind it anyway. Now, it obviously does work. They don't crack. So they did do something right there. Like, could they have done it something different? Probably. But they were trying, you know, like probably 18 engineers, took 5 years to do that. So, you know, they did an okay job. We can't give them too hard of a time on that. Now, that is the biggest, on a 6/7 block, strength-wise, that is the biggest reason that this block is stronger than that block. The cylinders do not move around, and because of that, every one of the cylinders is tied together in the middle, where these ones, the cylinders can kind of wobble around. I'm obviously exaggerating how much they move, right? Like, they don't move that much, but they do move. So that is an inherent problem with the 5/9, but if you're not trying to make boatloads of power, a 5/9 is a good platform. They hold a head gasket better. You know, it is what it is. In stock form, they hold a head gasket better. So you go from on this side of the blocks, let's go to the other side of the blocks, and there's a couple little differences and stuff that I like, but I'm still a bigger fan of the 6/7 than the 5/9. Now, if you have a 5/9 truck, it's a lot of money to switch to a 6/7 long block, I realize. But if you're building an engine or you're a performance guy or you're just like me and can't leave anything alone, I prefer the 6/7 platform over the 5/9 platform myself. Now, getting into, obviously this one's got the main caps on it, and this one we haven't, this one we're getting ready to assemble. We just have to do the final wash and then assemble on it. But there's a few little differences in the block on this side of the block. Now, they both run a 12 mil main bolt, so they're the same bore. Your main bore is the same size. They run a 180 degree, well, not all of them. Not all of them have a 180 degree thrust. You can get a 5/9 and a 6/7 with a 360 thrust. I'm not even gonna go into it. Some of them you could get. There are not very many of them. And you can get 6/7s that way too. I do have a couple of those that I'm hoarding for my own stuff. But they're basically the same when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Now, one thing that I do like about a 5/9 that the 6/7 does not have is if you look right here, see those little blue caps? See those little blue caps? That is for an oil squirter, right? Or an oil jet, whatever you want to call it. So they do both have J-jets just like these ones. Now, the early models of the 5/9 actually came with a steel one, which there again, when I get those, I always hoard them and I just put these new ones in. But these both run that. And on the 5/9 and both of the common rail pistons have a revision inside the piston, and this jet actually shoots oil up into the piston, and the oil goes around both sides of the piston and comes back out, keeps the piston cool. That is part of the reason a common rail will sustain more EGT temperature and not explode. That is part of the reason. A lot of people don't realize that. But On a 5.9, now this is something that I'm actually doing on the burnout motor for you. Well, you guys haven't seen those videos yet. Building a new motor for the burnout truck. But we're using a 5.9 common rail block because I want to add all the oil jets. Now, it's more complicated than that. I'll get into it on that, but just, you can do that as long as you set it up properly. Now, on my tow series engines, if I'm doing a 5.9 for a guy, what we do is we actually take one of these plugs out on number 6, and we actually put a regular oil squirter in from a 12 valve in there. And the reason I do that is to try to keep some of the heat out of number 6 piston. Now, that's what I'm talking about, is you can do it on all of them, but you have to modify some stuff to make it work. Otherwise, they run low oil pressure. And everyone I've ever seen that had it like that didn't have modifications done to it, they don't seem to last, they blow up, and then you're rebuilding it again. Ask me how I know. So, though there's still a few guys around here that do that because they think it's a good idea and they have problems, but here nor there. But on a 6.7, they do run this, but there is no revision in the block. There is a revision for it. I said that's the wrong word. They never drilled the actual hole out. The revision is there. Like you can see this little thing right here. That's what that's for. Like if you look at this one, you can see it, right? Where it's drilled out. So you could drill them. I never have, but you could drill them if you really wanted to, I suppose, and install oil squirters. But I've never done that on a 6.7. Something that I've thought about, but just never done it. And maybe when I get a CNC mill, maybe that'll be something we'll get into, but just never have done it. But that is one thing I do like about the 5.9 over the 6.7 is that those extra oil squirter holes is if you want to add an oil squirter to number 6, you can add some oil to the system. But other than that, there's really not a lot of differences to the 6. Like the 6.7 inherently is a better platform. 1, because of the displacement. 2, because of the Siamese bores, and they do have a better injection system in my opinion, or more robust, I guess maybe is the right word. But whether or not that's actually true, what I've seen and taken the injectors apart, I personally think they're a little bit better, the injection system, in factory form, obviously. Because the 5.9 definitely had a lot of problems with injectors. With the 6.7 does have injector problems, just different injector problems. So anyways, I hope that this helped you guys out seeing the difference between a 5.9 versus a 6.7. If there's anything I missed, or if you want me to do a video on something, hit me in the comments. And if you like this video, check out this one.